あるかもしれない。
So before the video starts, I want to clarify real quick, I am a little bit sick, so you can tell the difference in my voice here is because of that. However, even when I'm still sick, I can still be a hater, and especially a hater to one of my favorite franchises, Jojo's. I have a wide variety of opinions in the negative connotation for this franchise for several different reasons. Some personal, some a lot of people share. Overall, you can see this video as a bit of a critique slash the things I just don't like about this franchise after spending so much time with it. And a side note here, I'm not going to criticize the manga too much here. I have a much bigger Araki video planned where I will go a lot more in depth on it in the future. And if for whatever reason you're watching this in the past and I've already uploaded that Araki video, please check it out. You might be interested. But just to do a bit of contradiction, I will talk about the manga very briefly and what I dislike about it to a very minimal point, as I can go on for hours. Now, one of the first things I want to talk about here that kind of grinds my gears is monthly waiting slash the byproduct of monthly waiting for JoJo chapters. Trying to keep your audience engaged month to month is extremely difficult, because to put this into perspective, you have to make a really good chapter that lasts basically a whole month in somebody's head to therefore get them to read the next chapter. That is insanely difficult, and I have to give credit to where credit is due. Anybody who's able to successfully do that is a master at what they are doing. But then to all of a sudden get some Joe Schmo to tell you that, like, I hate waiting month to month, it makes the experience worse, it's bad, etc, etc. Dude, I get so belligerently angry, dog. And it's not the whole like I have to wait month to month part. I understand that. I at sometimes get bored of it, like, okay man, I really have to wait month to month for this shit. But then to just say the story's bad for some reason because you have to wait month to month because it feels slow is the single dumbest thing I've ever heard. And the fact that it's recurring makes me angry. If you have a problem on waiting monthly to read something, just binge it. It's okay. I'm not gonna hate you for it. What I am gonna hate you for is when you complain about it for being monthly and then by product of it being monthly say that you hate it. No, just don't do that. I'm gonna roast you in my comment section if you do that. And this isn't a recent issue too. I've noticed it with part 9 and part 8 during its entire run. Only then for those same people to come back and say, those parts are actually pretty good. What? You snake ass mother... Anyway, you know what? No, I'm gonna let it go. I'm gonna let it go, but it makes me angry. It definitely makes me angry. Anyway, I'll move on. Like I said, I'll keep manga criticisms for a much bigger Araki video in the future, but I will talk about a few here that I think I can get to the point pretty quickly. So the first thing I want to talk about is the JoJo antagonists. I personally hate, this is in terms of all fiction, when a villain shows up too late to the development party. And sadly for me, this happens in JoJo's quite a few times. The biggest example of them would be Dio from part 3, solely looking at him, not his overall grand character, especially Toru as well, and Diavolo. And maybe a bit of Cars in there too, I'll throw that in. The reason why I point out these characters is because other JoJo villains just do the villainy part better. To use an analogy to explain that, think of a villain as a lollipop dangling over your head. You know he's there, you know he's probably sweet, but you can't really exactly taste him. Always just being out of reach until the very end where they shove it down your throat and you really can't, you know, digest them and really fundamentally understand them as a villain. Basically, this entire analogy is for character development and just seeing them on screen doing villain stuff. All the villains I previously mentioned fail at this, while all the villains I didn't mention, like Kira, Poochie, and Funny Valentine, let me taste them every so often, maybe even fully on lick them if I need to. Insert gay joke here. Now, this isn't a complaint for JoJo's in its entirety. This goes for all fiction I have ever watched. A lot of the time, I find it very perplexing how a author or a writer does not build up their villain like they build up their hero. These are two main characters that we have to constantly deal with. Why not elaborate on them? Why is one evil? Why is one good? This is why, example here, Berserk is so awesome. We get to know a lot about Griffith and his actions. It's why he's such a compelling villain to begin with. Now, I want to clarify something here. I don't mean I want more sympathetic villains. That's not what I'm talking about here. That's a completely different archetype and a different conversation in general. What I want here is more screen time for the villains here so I understand why they're villains. It's very simple, but for some reason, a lot of people just mess up on this, especially in JoJo's. Even JoJo's can be criticized by a guy who loves JoJo's. Criticize your favorite media. It does honestly make it better. So this next one is probably going to feel a lot more individualistic than like a broader scope everybody can agree with. like the villains one previous. I want previous JoJo characters to show up in JoJo parts a lot more. But since we're so close to probably the end of Araki's career, this complaint's more like a, why didn't we see more people from previous parts in newer parts with a major role? Clarification here, not a cameo or something, a major role. Like they're a key part to the story. I think this has gotten better with time, but my critiques are in the earlier parts. JoJo's universe, and especially JoJo's Earth, is relativistically pretty small. And with a stand rule that states stand users will attract other stand users, I find it very funny that we attract very little stand users that overlap in between certain parts. And to clarify, I'm not talking about heroes here. I want villains. I want the whole horses. The OG like stand villains showing up doing mercenary jobs for certain characters, or just randomly showing up in Morio or something, or Poochie hiring the guys from Dio's previous idea or cult or whatever you want to say it was, mercenary group for part 6. I think that would be a very interesting idea. It would make the parts feel more interconnected beyond the Joestar bloodline. And by showing off these villains or heroes more, whatever you want to choose, you can give them more character development than they had in their original part or something like that. So why doesn't Araki do it? He just doesn't want to. Wait, you serious? Yeah, I'm being serious. Damn. Honestly, full criticism, full hate here on Araki. Crazy amount of potential wasted. Just like, I can't explain it any further. It's honestly bullshit. And ever since reading that he just doesn't like to, it grinds my gears heavily. Why not? Just because you don't want to, or it's gonna ruin something? It's not. It's going to add to it. It's gonna be more interesting. The world's gonna feel a lot more lively and connected. It's just, I don't understand him. It's just weird. I just gotta accept it, I guess. But it's just like, okay, but you're wasting stuff here. Let's move on to the anime, which I do have a few opinions to talk about. The biggest being the changes to the part 1 anime. Now, I've always heard the part 1 anime has been kind of hard for people to get into for several reasons, but it wasn't up until recently during a rewatch with my girlfriend is where I fundamentally understood these criticisms. To set the stage, my girlfriend understood that Dio was the villain. This is pretty obvious through how the anime shows him. However, it did not show how he was very cruel. When I went to show her how the manga portrayed Dio as a villain, her tone completely changed. It was the Danny scene, by the way. I showed her the Danny scene in the manga. She understood that Dio is a complete psychopath and is literally just pure evil. The anime kind of showed her that, but once I gave her the full context, she fully understood that. I then showed her the alternate scenes and stuff that the anime cut out, and then she kind of had this eureka moment of being like, oh, I finally understand why it's called a bizarre adventure. There seems to be a lot of hijinks and funniness to all this crazy shit that's happening. And that's when it clicked with me. I now understand why some people can't get into the JoJo's franchise in general through the anime, because it's not like the manga. Now, I'm not trying to make a manga versus anime thing here. It's just the anime is different enough to where it just doesn't feel like the correct way to get into it, therefore leading into not getting into JoJo's at all. And that honestly kind of sucks, man. JoJo's is hyper fascinating. It's just an overall good franchise. It's a good series. But due to this hiccup in the road, some people just can't get into it. And it just sucks. I hate it now. I really do. It's just like, wow, man, all the potential fans that could have loved this franchise just had a little bit of a tripsy on the road, and now we're here talking about it. But I'm going to do a bit of self-contradictory here. I do think trimming of the JoJo fat in terms of making it into an anime adaptation is good. However, David Productions does a mediocre job at doing this to a failing point. Like I previously said, when they do it, some people just can't get into the franchise. And when they don't do it, JoJo seems very oddly long and just kind of drawn out like it was in the manga, which an anime adaptation should change. Full honest criticism, the weekly stand fight, theme that part 3 had was terrible. Some of these fights did not need to happen. Some of these fights just were plain boring. They could have been cut, and I'm gonna be honest, I don't think a lot of people would have complained. And that goes for other parts too. Some scenes just didn't need to be adapted. And sometimes DP does a good job at this. A good example of this is the weird characterization Weather Report had in the manga where he injured some girls with heavy weather/Weather Report. The anime didn't adapt that, and it was good because even in the original manga adaptation, that was weird. I don't know why Weather Report did that. And yes, I will give some grace. It is pretty hard to cut some things over others or to cut things in general because you don't want to change the original source too much when adapting it. Overall, I just wish DP just did it a bit more. However, just being a bit more smart about it. So moving on from the actual series to the physical media, I have a lot of things to actually discuss here. Personally, the biggest one for me being the current publication of the Jojo's manga. What do you mean metas, you say? Well, there actually is a lot here. More than I think I could actually talk about in a single video, because there's a lot of people that are pressed about this thing. Now, in specific with me and what I hate about it is the fact that we are still on part 6. Context here, Stone Ocean's manga ended its serialization back in 2003. The current year is 2024, meaning that it has taken over 21 years for this manga to get a proper release here in the West, in specific, and it's not even done yet. And that just doesn't go for part 6, it goes for all of them. By the time we got halfway through part 8, we were barely on part 4 here in the West. On top of that, it's been decades since part 4 finished. Why are we barely getting it now? Answer, Viz is just slow for some reason. Now, you might think I might be joking here, but I'm not. That's actually probably the case. Viz is pretty notorious for having a very slow publication cycle. Other than using Jojo as an example, you can use Chainsaw Man. For a very long time, there would be massive gaps in between the Japanese release and the English release of some manga volumes. Why? I have no clue. They just did that for some apparent reason. Because when it comes to more relevant series, they'll instantly drop it once they have enough pages for a manga release. Kagurabachi being the example here. But you can say here that in terms of the Jojo manga's quality, it is really good, so it probably does take a while to produce that type of stuff, right, metas? Nope. Now, I will give credit where it's due. In terms of Jojo's hardcovers and the actual manga volumes themselves, they are ridiculously good. I own a lot of them personally myself. But the actual quality inside the book is where it actually truly matters. And I'll honestly say it's a bit wishy-washy. For whatever reason, they cover up a lot of manga art for cover chapters. Why? No clue. I buy these books to see the art. Why cover them at all? It's really perplexing. And what makes it funnier, and just to twist the dagger sideways while it's already in you, both France and Italy have been up to date with the Jojo manga for a very, very long time now. I think if I remember correctly, they are just a volume or two off from the Japanese release of part 9. That is equally hilarious as I am equally mad at Viz. What the And if memory holds correctly, I don't think they started serializing it until like way after. So there was a massive gap for them as well, but they caught up very, very quickly, unlike us. I'm extremely disappointed and angry. Moving on. The Jojo color scans up until recently have been hot garbage. They are 100% ass. For a very long time before we got to part 7, the Jojo color scans weren't that half bad. While sometimes they are very muted and not very like vibrant and colorful like some Jojo color illustrations by Araki, they're pretty decent for the most part. Actually, I like part 3 Stardust Crusaders color scans a lot actually. But during the early parts of part 7, they were pretty notoriously bad, just having very weird like color choices and the way they colored them. It just looked very off for the most part. Eventually, they kind of corrected it and it looked pretty decent for the most part, but somewhere during part 8, it just got really, really weird. Somebody started oversaturating a lot of the colors for these part 8 characters. Color theory is very important when designing a character and when coloring them. So when you completely disregard it, it is extremely noticeable, and especially noticeable in a series like Jojo, which uses colors very heavily to emphasize a lot of things, both in colored illustrations by Araki himself and the anime. So when you don't take that into account and make whatever the they were doing in part 8, it just looks bad. However, in part 9, they somehow made it worse, doing a worse coloring job and having coloring errors all over the place. Personally, it's so bad that I just prefer to use the part 9 black and white illustrations when showing something from those parts, because it's like an eyesore looking at part 9 right now colored. It's just really bad. I personally do not like it. It's just a no bueno on my side, dude. It's just no. Just no. Their unpaid intern who's coloring all these manga needs to do a better job. That's some harsh criticism, but they need it. I definitely, though, they need it. Anyway, moving on to a grander look at Jojo, I want to talk about the content here, or the lack thereof. In specific here, where the hell are the Jojo movies? No, I'm being 100% serious. Where are the movies? Like, every other, like, major anime has, like, multiple different movie adaptations if the series is popular enough, but Jojo's has been mainstream for a long time now, and we have one movie, and that movie is not not even readily available for anybody to see. Actually, it's lost media, so nobody can see it. So we basically have nothing in this department. Jojo's is almost 40 years old, and we have one unseen movie. That is absolutely ridiculous. But then you're probably going to say, meta is maybe there's just not enough content for a standalone Jojo movie or special. Not gonna lie, bro, you sound really dumb for that. Purple Haze Feedback, Golden Wind, Golden Heart, Genesis of the Universe, the multiple part 4 stories, the part 2 story that showed up and that just finished with Lisa. There's like 5 I just mentioned off the top of my head. Not to mention George Joestar, you could make a lot of content off of that alone. So in fact, yes, there is a plethora, a massive magnitude of extended Jojo media content you can make into specials and movies. And that's just the non-canon stuff. I can talk about a lot of different canon stuff that I would love to be seen turned into movies. One of the biggest ones that I want to see is a story take place after part 3 where Polnareff and Jotaro find the stand arrows. I think that would be a really good concept for a movie. But for whatever reason, Shueisha or David Productions just haven't came up with the idea for this, even though it would make them a ton of money. However, I do think I know the reason, because if you know your Jojo history, OVA and the movie adaptation of Part 1 Phantom Blood has a little bit of a sketchy history behind it. They probably just don't want to touch the idea of a Jojo's movie for a very long time because it's kind of quote unquote cursed, I guess. Or maybe they see it as tainted because the Phantom Blood movie did not do very well, so they're just like, nah, let's never do it again. Which honestly is a pretty shitty excuse. Just because you failed once doesn't mean you shouldn't try again. That's a loser's mentality. There are key reasons to why that movie failed. If you figure out what those key reasons are, which a lot of fans would be able to tell you, don't do them and you will have a successful JoJo's movie. It's really not that hard. I swear, if I don't get a wacky JoJo's movie, I'm gonna start throwing things, man. I swear to God. Now, moving on to an untapped market that I am very disappointed that has not been tapped and I want to see more of, and if I don't, I'm gonna start throwing things just like the previous example, JoJo video games. At the same time as the anime has been out, there's only been 3 video games that have been released in correlation with JoJo's. One of them just being a remaster of an older one. So in reality, we've only ever truly had 2. JoJo's world is vast and large, having multiple different storylines taking place at once that can be turned into games. I would honestly love to play a game where I'm Josuke running around in a Persona-esque Mario doing random things. It would be awesome to experience that world with Josuke. Or on the other hand, maybe exploring an open world game as Johnny exploring the American West looking for the corpse parts. Or a more personal one, even more personal than the last 2, a fighting game, but actually with netcode and a way better fighting game like system. The whole thing needs to be revamped. I want a fighters-esque Dragon Ball game or like a Street Fighter-esque JoJo's game. I need it, man. I need, we were playing old stuff. I want new stuff, man. Like I'm giving a lot of ideas out here. I genuinely get frustrated how I want more content. I'm willing to pay for more content, but these guys are not providing anything, man. I want something. I can't keep on playing Heritage of the Future. I know it looks good, but it's dated as fuck. Please make something new. It doesn't even have to be a fighting game. Just give me something. Now, that's all I have to say for now. I genuinely think I can probably make I'm just gonna leave that in. I can probably make another video if I wanted to, criticizing JoJo, hating on certain parts. I love this franchise a lot, and I do have my problems with it. And next time I won't be sick, but I still do find it pretty ironic when I want to make this video, I get sick. Is it an ill omen? No clue. Is it hilarious? By God, yes, it is. Anyway, like, comment, share, subscribe, follow me on Twitter, stay hydrated. See you in the next one, ladies and gentlemen. Deuces.